Hi everybody and welcome to the second lesson of the Python Basics course. In the last lesson we did a quick walkthrough through REPL.it, which you can see open here, and REPL.it is what we are using to write programs and play with Python code. And in this lesson we are actually going to dive into some Python. Specifically we are going to look at what's called built-in functions. And built-in functions are just one of the different functionalities that Python gives you, which you can use in order to write programs in Python. Before we start, maybe one or two words about programming in general. You may know that there are a bunch of programming languages around. So maybe you've heard about C or C++ or Ruby, JavaScript, Java. Funnily enough, Java and JavaScript don't have anything to do with each other really, except the name, overlap in the name. So there are a few languages. Actually, there are many languages. It's just happens to be in such a way that only a few are in widespread use. So there's an entire programming language just that no one has ever heard of that exists somewhere. But there are a few that are widespread and commonly used. And Python is one of them. Each one of those programming languages sort of gives you a set of functionalities which you can use. And like we're going to see today with the built-in functions in Python. And what you do essentially if you write code is you use these functionalities which your language gives you, and you put them together in such a way to have your program do something. That's sort of the entire point of programming, in a way, that you write a program in order to do a job, in a way. So that's sort of in a way, the architectural part of writing programs, which is that you have to figure out what you want to do, as well as being able to then sort of embody it into code within the language that you are using. So the first part in writing any program is always, what program do I want to write? Which is one part of the process that's, in my opinion, kind of neglected, unfortunately, too often. But very important. Every coding project starts with somebody having an idea for something to build, for something to be built. And then you figure out, what do I need to do in order to build this thing? And then you try to figure out, how am I going to use Python, or whichever my preferred language is, specifically to make that happen. And that's the kind of the business that we programmers are in, to embody our ideas in code, so to speak. Right, so that's sort of programming in general. There are many different languages. Their purpose is to give you what you need to write programs whose purpose is to do something that you want to get done. It may sound a little obvious, but I figure it's worth making very clear. Alright, so built-in functions. In the last lesson I wrote this small program, which is the traditional Hello World program. And actually in writing this program we are already using a built-in function, which is the print built-in function. And what we're doing here is print. This is the print built-in function by itself. It's followed by parentheses. And we are providing print with something to print. And what printing means in this context is sort of outputting something into what in REPL.it is this black screen. So whatever we write into the parentheses after print will be outputted here on the right hand side. So if we change this up and write London is great, and run the program, it will print London is great. So print is the built-in function in Python to print something out into what's sometimes called the standard output, our black little screen. Now with any built-in function, it's always the same pattern. It's the name of the built-in function followed by parentheses, opening and closing, and then usually something goes in here, which is some piece of information that the function needs to know in order to do what it's supposed to do. So print needs to know what it's supposed to print out, whether it's Hello World or London is great. Now in Python there are roughly, as far as I know, around 30 or 40 built-in functions which just come with Python. They're part of this toolbox that Python essentially is. But don't worry, you don't have to know all of them. Like, there are a few handful of built-in functions which are handy to know. Otherwise, you know, Google is always your best friend. By the way, even for real, so to speak, programmers, Google is like, you don't need to have any pride about having everything memorized. You can just Google things. So maybe show you a few more built-in functions which are in common use. One is len, and len will give you the length of something that you pass in the parentheses. So let's say we have the pass in, don't know, you know, if we just do hello world again, it will count the characters of hello world, and this piece of code, line 2, will thus be however many characters are in here. So I'm not sure, what is it, 11 or 12? Now if we run this program, you see in our output that we don't really see anything, and the reason for that is that we haven't printed it out. So this line of code was executed. The computer, or rather the REPL.IT computers, did do this computation, but because we didn't print it out, they don't show us the outcome. So if we want to do this, we have to sort of wrap this statement into a print function. So if you see the logic here, this is our len piece of code, which will give us the length of this piece we put in here, and then we print that out. So if we run this, you can see it's 12. And here's already one thing that you may want to consider, which is that if you read a piece of code, it doesn't always go from left to right. You see in this execution here, the first thing that the computer does is this piece of computation. First it figures out how long hello world is, and then whatever the outcome is in here, that gets becomes the input to the print function. So that's one thing that people can get confused about. Like reading a piece of program is not like reading human text. You tend to always go from top to bottom, but the execution doesn't strictly go from left to right. You have to sort of figure out the logic. Alright, so then len in this example is another built-in function. Another one that may be illustrative would be one function called sum, and pass in a bunch of numbers here. And don't worry too much about this construct with the square brackets. We are going to look at that later. But what sum does is it will sum these different numbers up and give you the sum total, which if you just run it again, you don't see it because we have to print it out. And to see to highlight what's actually happening, it's almost as if we just paste the piece of code in there. So if you run the program now, here we go, it shows us the output. The output is being printed. So the sum built-in function does its job, which is kind of the definition of being a built-in function. Every built-in function does a particular thing for you if you use it. Print prints stuff out. Length shows you the length of something. Sum sums, you know, it sums stuff up. And in a way, this is already sort of the tiniest example of how you combine things that the language gives you to do something, which is, you know, the first thing we do is we sum something up and then we print it out. And pretty much all of writing programs is sort of combining these different bits and pieces that the language gives you into something that you want to do. Maybe one last example for built-in function, max. And what max does is it will essentially return to you the largest value out of a sequence of numbers. So if we have this sequence here, 20, 40, 10 and 10,000, what max will do is max will just return to you the largest one out of that set. So here's the output. That will be 10,000 out of these. Alright, so these are some built-in functions, and I hope you already maybe you already get a sense that this is one of the tools that Python gives you, which you can use for your purposes. So programming is sometimes compared to playing Lego, actually, and then at least I've heard it said, and in some sense that actually is analogous, because in Lego, you know, you've got these different pieces, each of which has a small functionality, and what you do as a kid or as an adult, if you play Lego, you put them together to create something. And that's hope this is a good taster for you to see how the journey of programming could sort of lead in that direction. Alright, that's it for now. Some overview about programming in general and built-in functions, in particular these 4 examples here. In the next lesson we're going to look at these things, which are denoted with the quotation marks and which are called strings in programming and in Python. So yeah, looking forward and see you in the next lesson. Bye bye.